Through you, Mr. Chair, it is 4 p.m. and the live stream and recording has commenced.
There we go. Okay. So, hold on a sec. This isn't the same.
Oh, it's just right underneath your laptop.
Oh, there it is.
I can start with the land acknowledgement if you'd like.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so before we begin, I will start with the land acknowledgement statement. We begin this meeting by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, and acknowledging reminds us that our great standards of living are directly related to the resources and the friendship of the Indigenous people. To you, Mr. Chair, you may begin with your introduction.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. The chair today is myself, John Kappa. I also have Don Robart on my right and Brenda Stan at the end there. Secretary Treasurer is Sarah Leach. Planner is Andrew Edwards. I believe Andrew's there as well. And the engineering manager, Derek, yes, is here as well. So those are the people here tonight. This is a hybrid hearing of the Committee of Adjustment for the Town of Pelham. Everyone present and viewing at home via live stream will be given an opportunity to comment on the applications being heard. Agencies commenting on applications may request that certain conditions be imposed should an application be approved. Voicing objections to these conditions will not adversely affect the committee's decision. The purpose of the application and relative correspondence will be heard, following which the applicant will be given the opportunity to address the application. During the public portion of each application, we will hear from everyone wishing to submit verbal comments or submit a written comment via email to clerks@pelham.ca. Comments received following the public portion will not be considered. At the conclusion of the discussion, the committee will render a decision and advise of any applicable conditions. Specific wording for conditions may be determined by the committee following the hearing. Copies of the decision will be mailed to the applicant, agent, and members of the public that have submitted comments. Notices of decisions can also be obtained by request to the Secretary Treasurer. Committee members are asked to raise your hand if you would like to speak and vote. Applicants, agents, and attendees are advised that they are free to leave the webinar hearing once a decision has been made on their application. I'd like to look for someone to motion the approval for the agenda for today.
I'll do that.
Thanks, Don.
Motion made.
Okay. Does any member of this panel have I say that wrong, pecuniary interest, I always say that wrong, in accordance with the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act in any of the applications to be considered at this hearing?
None.
I have none.
Yeah, we all have none. Are there any requests for withdrawal or adjournment?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes. Due to the unfulfillment of notice requirements, we have B11/2023P and A17/2023P. They have not been met, and therefore these files can't proceed this afternoon. Having said that, staff are working to get these files on the very next agenda. However, we do have the applicant for those files with us this evening, Mr. Harper, and I do believe Mr. Harper would like to make comments, if this is still the case. If so, Mr. Harper can join the podium. There is a microphone, if you wouldn't mind just turning it on before you're speaking. Thank you.
Yes, it's true. I didn't fulfill the sign requirements, and it's my own fault because I misread the instructions. The portion specific that I made the mistake on was the fact that it said I had to have the sign posted for a minimum of 2 weeks before the hearing, and I didn't conclude that that meant right up until the minute of the meeting. I just thought it meant a cumulative total of 2 weeks sometime before the meeting. So I've accepted that that's the issue, and there's nothing I can do about it now. I was just hoping that maybe there was some way we could find a way to maybe waive some of the fees for, obviously I'm coming back for the next available meeting to represent my application, so I didn't know if there was any movement there on what's going to cost to redo all this.
Yeah, so for the committee's information, the applicant is not required to submit application fees again. However, we do have a $269 recirculation fee. That would be applicable to each application. However, the Committee of Adjustment does have the ability to either waive both fees, one fee, or no fees at all, and it would come as a motion through the committee.
Okay, so how would the team like to proceed? I think, it sounds like it was just some misunderstanding there, so I don't think there was anything intentional in terms of going through the procedure. I mean, I'm comfortable with waiving him coming back, fees for him coming back. How does the rest of the group feel? Brenda?
Yeah, sure. I support that motion.
Okay. Thank you. All right.
Okay, through you, Mr. Chair, there has been no other requests for withdrawal or adjournment, and therefore that brings us to our first application this afternoon, being B12. I will now share our presentation. Committee of Adjustment hearing September 5th at 4 p.m. The Town of Pelham is holding hybrid Committee of Adjustment hearings. A hybrid hearing involves a mixture of in-person and remote attendance and participation. The following presentations are based on the Town of Pelham's Planning Department report and analysis. Please note that no decisions have been made prior to this public hearing. All comments received from commenting agencies and the public have been forwarded in full to the Committee of Adjustment members. The Committee of Adjustment is a formal public hearing requiring decorum. This means that all comments are to be made through the chair. If you've pre-registered to speak virtually or will be participating in person, you'll be given the opportunity to address the committee at the public portion. If you are live streaming and wish to submit a comment live, please email clerks@pelham.ca. Comments must be received during the public portion of the meeting, otherwise they will not be considered. Inappropriate comments will also not be tolerated. To allow for an efficient meeting, each member of the public will be given an opportunity to speak to the committee during the public portion of the meeting. After all members of the public have spoken, the applicant or agent will be given the opportunity to address the comments. Application B12/2023 P305 Canberra Road. The subject parcel is shown as Part 1 on the sketch and has a frontage of 63.55 meters on the north side of Canberra Road, lying west of Effingham Street in the town of Pelham. Application is made for consent to convey 4,791.7 square meters of land, being Part 1, for continued residential use of 305 Canberra Road. Part 2 is to be retained for continued agricultural use. No new construction is proposed as part of this application. To date, the following comments have been received and are summarized below. Building Department, no comment. Public Works, C conditions. Niagara regional staff offer no objection to the application as the proposal is consistent with and in conformity to provincial and regional policies. One public comment was received at the time of writing this report and is summarized as follows. Inquired about the zoning of the property, expressed concern with potential new driveway connections off of Canberra Road and impacts on the street parking. Planning staff is of the opinion the proposed lot adjustment is consistent with the PPS and conforms to provincial, regional, and local plans subject to conditions. The resulting parcels should not negatively impact the surrounding neighborhood with respect to traffic, servicing, privacy, and stormwater management. Planning staff recommend that application B12/2023P be approved subject to the following conditions. That Part 2 be rezoned to an agricultural purposes only zone. That the applicant submit a comprehensive overall lot grading and drainage plan for all parts, demonstrating that drainage neither relies upon nor negatively impacts adjacent properties, and that all drainage will be contained within the respective lots to the satisfaction of the Director of Public Works. That the applicant confirm no existing utilities cross the proposed lot line. In the event that services do cross, the applicant shall be responsible for the cost and responsibility of their relocation and/or removal. That the Secretary Treasurer be provided with a registrable legal description of the subject property, together with a copy of the deposited reference plan, if applicable, for use in the issuance of the certificate of consent. And that the final certification fee of $423 payable to the Treasurer be submitted to the Secretary Treasurer. If anyone here wishes to receive a copy of the notice of decision, you may leave your name with Jody at the corner of the room here, or send an email to sleach@pelham.ca. This contact information is also on the Town of Pelham's website. To you, Mr. Chair, we do have the representation here. We have the agent, Mr. Savriga, and the applicant, Mr. Rutina. If either wish to come and provide comments, you're welcome.
Thank you very much for entertaining us this today. My name is Dennis Savriga. Just to give you a bit of my background, I've spent 37 years with the city of Niagara Falls, and don't hold that against me. I had 7 years in engineering and 30 years in planning with the city, and got through some adventurous times, to say the least. You may recall this is our second attempt. The committee, the first considered the matter, actually granted approval. I submitted a 4-page report to the committee, explained to them the importance of Ridgeville being recognized, and I thought that there were a number of issues outstanding that should be addressed. We addressed them in terms of the Greenbelt plan, and the committee bought into it. We stressed very heavily on it being an employment area, and and in the agricultural community, it was an important asset to them. There were a lot of uses there that they used for quite a few years. It was important from a historical perspective that at least it be recognized. And that's probably where it stood out. And our final part of the report stressed that the Greenbelt, actually under Section 5, indicated that any bylaw that was approved prior to the implementation of the Green Plan was in effect. It didn't lose. It was grandfathered, for a better word. And that was kind of the strength of our application. And when the committee upheld the category, we were quite pleased. And unfortunately, the planner of the day was quite adamant that it was contrary, and was preparing a report to take to council and to request the appeal of the application. We requested through an application to the clerk that we be permitted to attend that meeting to see if we could indicate why the committee stood up for that application, and we were denied on the pretext that that council did not make the decision as yet, and so it was premature, which I found kind of odd. When the council did support the planner, we went back and we pre-applied again because we would like them to withdraw the application, because we'd like to further explain in the application why the committee found favorable to the application. We were denied again. And through that process, when we did get a copy of the agenda, we were listed as one of the people to come in and make presentation, but we were never informed otherwise by anyone in the town at that point in time. So anyways, we continued. We trudged on to say. We went back to the town with a further report requesting that Ridgeville be recognized in the official plan for the town. And at that time, the mayor simply said, I guess we just forgot it. And that was how it was left. So we made further representation at regional council and made a presentation there. Never heard anything. They thanked us there. And lo and behold, when the new Greenbelt plan came out, Ridgeville was recognized. It wasn't recognized in particular because that's left now with the municipality and the region to identify the boundaries of Ridgeville. So that kind of resolved that matter. I suppose I could have prepared another 4-page report and bored you with why Ridgeville is important, but I prefer not to do that. We just are here because the matter is supported. The only issues I have is maybe with some of the conditions. We're prepared, we're happy that there's support there from the staff and from all the other people that had made a commitment. And the only issue I have are, first of all, let's deal with, if I can, point to the recommendations, dealing with the need to provide a report or a study to the town engineer, cross-sectioning the property and providing elevations to find out which way the water flows on that property. I don't know if anyone knows the property or has visited it. I would expect all the committee members probably visited these sites and probably recognize from one of the highest points in the region is the number 20 in Effingham. And I have a professional person here, that Mr. Rotina, and he can best describe which way the water flows on that property. He's been there for 60 years. He's lived with the conditions there. And if I can, if you would like me, I can ask him the questions, or if anybody knows the direction to flow on that, we can shorten that discussion. We do have a solution, which I think, talking to the engineer or the engineer that was involved that I was talking to, that we would be prepared, because first of all, the land goes from north to south. And it has a slight canter going easterly to the roadway on Effingham. So generally the water progresses southeasterly. And because the water course, the main one on the other side of Effingham, is a major water course to the town. I asked Stan if he was suffering any water from the 4 or 5 houses north of him, if he was being burdened by runoff from there. His answer is no. I said, are you burdening the Bell property that's on the property? He said, have you ever received a complaint? He said, no. You've been burdened by Bell because you had the land south of them? And he says, no. Are you aware of any flooding on the roadway, the corner, which I think is a major indication whether, in fact, there's difficulties in that area with drainage? And he said, absolutely not. I approached the surveyor and asked him to undertake what it would cost. And it's not necessarily the cost, it's the amount of time that it would take for him to get anybody to go out there and stake out with the rod. They don't need the level anymore. I got rid of my level years ago when I was in engineering. And simply, run it, the cross sections, and come back with a report. Unfortunately, I would say to you that is very expensive to have a professional going out there and then going back and getting a report from the surveyor. And I would just indicate that if anybody has it, what I'm recommending is, because I handle these things through my engineering experience with the city, and most of the problems come within the urban area where stormwater is a major problem. Most farmers know how to look after the problems they have because they don't want unnecessary water on their land. These lands here are sand for the most part, and they drain quite quickly and quite easily. I mentioned to Mr. Rotina that the thing I see is a field drain being constructed along the northerly boundary of the Part 1, which would be adjacent to the Bell. And if any water was coming down that it would be drained out to Effingham. And he said, oh, you'll be prepared to do that because it's just a simpler solution and it doesn't have to bear the extra burden of maybe extra costs to have a surveyor go out there and entertain that kind of what I would call just a simple engineering study, and for that sake. So I would ask you to seriously consider that. I know the engineer is here. I'm quite sure he's familiar with the site. Oh, and the other thing that the survey, and I was surprised because I've used it myself, was going online, and all this information is available through the region and their mapping that they have available online. And he was taken back a bit, and he says, has he used the reports there? And I says, I can't tell you. Maybe he did. Maybe he saw something that I didn't. But nevertheless, like I say, it's the simple solution. The other one is, and the only thing is, excuse me while I take my glasses off, is Part 2 being rezoned to agricultural purpose only. I believe the land is zoned that now. I think what it really means is they would like to see no further housing being built on the lot. Rather than going through a zoning, because that's going to be another holdup to this whole application, because by the time we file again an application to rezone, another cost, going back, we'll miss the 1-year schedule to complete the whole application for any approval that may be granted. And my suggestion is perhaps registered within the deed that would be prepared for that no further housing would be permitted on that particular parcel. That would accomplish what what I feel the town planner really is trying to do. Alternatively, it may be better is to, rather than coming out and pointedly going through and saying these lands are different from other agricultural lands and what they call special crop, special crop, specialty crop. And if the town planner really feels adamant about, they should put something in the new zoning bylaw that addresses that and indicate that housing is not, a matter of fact, permitted on these lands that are zoned. But the owner of these lands would come forward and make application in order to have a house maybe put on the lands. Most of the farmers these days aren't interested in housing. They're interested in leasing and renting lands and not necessarily living on the property that they're in fact servicing. So that's the other matter. I'm quite sure we can cover that off through the registration of that part 2 because we have to develop a new deed for that. And other than that, I would seriously suggest that the planning department have another serious look and find an alternative matter that just doesn't selectively pick one lot because they're going to be inundated maybe and having to deal with these things. And it shows up on the zoning map as special provisions or exceptions, whereas you could include them automatically in the zoning bylaw, prohibiting them and dealing with that through applications, perhaps not as many, and not dealing with or dealing with them at all. So that's verbally my presentation. Do you have any questions on me? I'd be prepared to answer them if I can further.
Yes, so thank you for your comments, by the way. I clearly understand, and I just want to make sure that there's really 2 issues here. The one is the drainage, right?
Yes.
And needing I guess, a survey of the land to see how the entire property actually drains. And the town had concerns about that and wanted to see a report.
I can appreciate that.
Right, and for that one there, have you looked into cost? You had mentioned it was quite expensive. Do you have any idea cost?
Yeah, because there was no information providing how tight you wanted the gridding.
Right.
Whether you wanted them in half meter, meter, just so, and all that requires more detail on the land itself. But you can feel best assured, we know the drainage of that property. In fact, the engineers say, well, they accept me the surveyors say, drawing lines on the map in that direction and certifying it.
Okay.
Because that's as simple as he can best describe it. And that cost is fairly reasonable just for his time, because he's prepared to do that. And because he said it shows up on the map quite clearly. And other than that, unless the city is dealing with something unknown, that's the direction of all the drainage and is from the site and others around it, in fact.
Okay, so maybe I'll ask the town just to maybe clarify a bit more why that's required, and maybe is it just a part of the process? Is it, something that we ask all applicants to what is the reasoning behind that, so we can understanding?
Through you, Chair. It is something we ask on all severances. So it's a standard clause that goes in there. The reason we ask this is we know that severed parcels end up getting developed. Not now, but in 5 or 10 years from now, somebody will come in for a rezoning to want to build on there. We need to understand what the existing property boundary lines are so that we ensure that the new development that goes forward doesn't impact them. We can then look at the plan that's submitted now as part of the severance and say, okay, currently the drainage does this. We're happy with what the drainage does. It's when somebody comes in to build a new one and they start changing those grades and start putting hard surfaces on there, that drainage has to go somewhere. And a lot of the time it drains onto neighboring properties. And that's why we ask for this, to ensure that The neighboring properties are not relying on that severed property, so if somebody does decide to build on that in 5 or 10 years' time, they're not going to be relying on a neighbor's property that's, it's been drained through there for, 30, 40 years and it's never been an issue. Now all of a sudden the hard standing comes on there. There's a significant amount of water going through there, and it then becomes an issue because that property's also changed hands.
Right.
It's more of a precaution rather than a necessity to protect neighboring homeowners.
Now, wouldn't the changes come into play? Sorry, Don, did you want to say something?
Which neighboring homeowners? And I don't see any neighboring homeowners on this plan.
Well, there are 1, 2, 3 to the south of that property that's being severed.
Right.
And there's one right in the middle of it, 1390. There's 317 Canberra Road. There's 311 Canberra Road. There's 1368 Effingham.
Okay.
These are properties that need to be protected. They're at the bottom of the hill.
Okay.
What we don't want to happen is when hard standing goes in there, all that runoff heads south.
Right. Now, would that be part of the application once that property is developed, part one? Wouldn't that be part of that?
Each individual parcel will then have to come up with its own grading plan indicating that it's not relying on each other.
Right. Okay. Okay. Any more questions on that, guys? I know that was the first point. Did you want to add something?
Yeah,
Please.
I've dealt with these developments and what have you. Normally, those are the matters dealt with through site plan control, because when anybody's coming in and developing the plan, they have to detail not only the peripheral of the elevations around them, but also how they're handling to manage the stormwater effluent coming from the site and where it will go. That's usually done in serious consultation with the engineering departments at that point in time. Whether it's now or 10 years from now, that will never change. Okay, and basically, if the lands are left for farming, it's not likely to impact any greater than they are now, maybe except for climate changes, who knows that. But nevertheless, that's a serious part, and that in itself, a great deal more information, because you not only have the thing, but you have the development, you have the parking standards, you have all that other thing, all provided where everyone is fully aware of what's committed to the property, and as well as taking in consideration the developments around it to make sure that no fluent is draining onto and bothering adjoining neighbors. And I'm quite sure that the engineers will study the roadside drainage pattern as it is now, and any adjustments that have to be made at that, I'm quite sure will be adequately addressed.
Okay. Any other questions or points on this?
Yeah,
Yes,
I'd like
please.
to go back to your question.
Yes.
Your concern, or the town's concern is some future building on this lot may exacerbate a drainage issue? Because I'm
Through you,
wondering
Mr.
why,
Chair.
I don't see any new construction going on this property.
Through you, Mr. Chair. It may not happen now.
I'm not the chair, he's the chair.
Well, I still have to go through, Mr. Chair.
It's in the middle, so.
I still have to go through, Mr. Chair. This is more as so we know what the current levels are. The elevations and everything on the property we need to know now. We need to know whether or not it drains through an adjacent property. We need to know what the drainage pattern is. We do not have a elevation plan for this site, so we have no idea where the current drainage goes. This will then give us the indication as to what the drainage currently does, what the grades currently do, and where the water currently flows. What we don't want to happen is that current drainage pattern to be changed or impacted in 5 or 10 years' time should somebody decide to develop it.
But
We-
nobody would do development without coming to the town for permission and
But we
submitting.
have nothing to compare it against. We would have to take that development's word that what they're showing us is correct. Whereas if we get a plan now, should it come forward in 5, 10 years' time, we have a reference plan we can go back to that say that when this was severed off, this is what the grades did, this is what the drainage did, this is what the elevations were. You are now changing them significantly, and it's going to impact adjacent properties.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Anything else? Sorry, please.
No, those were basically the
Okay.
2 points I'd like to.
I just wanted to get on the second point too, just before we go on, because I had some questions about the, well, hold on a sec now. the first point, I'm a little confused here. The
The
first
second
point.
one is
second one is the
rezone, and it's
rezoning.
already
Yes, the
zoned
rezoning.
agricultural.
Is the
Yes.
rezoning,
What's all that about?
Yeah, so.
another application,
Is there a planner to explain that?
which is basically this, going back and going through the Zoom.
understand.
Zoom meeting, and everyone committed to the
Sure.
making notes of what they've made here. And that's another cost to the applicant. And it's not the cost so much as the amount. We've been over 8 years on this particular project. The land was zoned well in advance and hopefully would have been built on years ago, but it's not. And they didn't have a contribution to that particular part of the community, and the impact would have been phenomenal. But nevertheless, the cost, again, being added to it, it's the time as well, going through that, and to bear the expense of it,
I appreciate your
I'm
point.
actually
Yep.
concerned
I guess
about the
I'll let Don, maybe you can ask the question here
What?
to the town. Like, I guess we all have the same question. So why change anything? If it's already agricultural right now, right? That part 2 is agricultural as it stands today. Why give it a special condition? I guess maybe we just need to understand that a bit more.
Sure. So through the chair, that requirement stems from the designation of this property as a specialty crop area in the Greenbelt Plan. The Greenbelt Plan typically discourages severance, so it's the severances. So it's the creation of the new lot that's triggering this need, as the policy states that typically severances are discouraged but they can be supported provided they do not create a separate lot for a residential dwelling. So it's really the intention of the agricultural production only to place a restriction on the property, so a residential use would not be permitted.
And that isn't currently the case now.
Currently, the properties designate or zone specialty agricultural, which permits a residential dwelling on an existing vacant property of record.
Okay.
So it's really the intention, again, through the law creation, that the residential dwelling not be permitted, and that's why that condition was included.
Okay.
Did you get that?
So just to clarify, in terms of, you require that rezoning so that it meets the intent of the official plan in the Greenbelt?
That's correct. So it would, that condition would bring the proposal in compliance with the Greenbelt Plan as well as the town's official plan.
I didn't get that. Explain.
Yeah, so basically you're just ensuring that it's sticking to is it regional or provincial? I think it's provincial plan, right?
Through the chair, the Greenbelt Plan is a provincial
Yeah.
plan, but
Okay.
the town's official plan reflects the Greenbelt Plan as well, so it is included in the town's official plan.
And
as
would
well.
this be the same process for any like applicants that would come to the table? I mean, this isn't something that's unusual or different, correct?
Through the chair, that's correct. It would be as a standard ask for
Okay.
any
Okay.
sort of lands
If-
like in this.
If I'm, hey, it is a new zone, it's not in the zoning bylaw now. So that means that has to be added. I'm not too sure how they progressed on their official plan, whether that has to be further amended to make this provision included, whether they'll have to
okay.
come back and
It's a more
have that processed again.
stringent
I'd say there's
agricultural.
a better process in which to have you written bylaws for most of my planning life, dealing with this particular request, and simply have it inclusionary in the zoning bylaw that puts it a comment across the board. It's fair to everyone. They know exactly what they have when they purchase land, that these things are not permitted in terms of houses. Those that exist continue as non-conforming use. Anyone that has to come forward in order to better control it, they can control it because they can, sometimes they have to judge and say, maybe this one deserves an official plan amendment and should go through.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily fair in all instances. And when you start loading up one end, then it seems to be a very simple process to get into. But it's just a matter that it doesn't seem fair to the rest of the community or to impact. It is agricultural land. The uses that they're permitted right now would be permitted on it now. The only issue is, the stop is the housing and further. I'm quite sure that the limits of this parcel have been met as far as not being able to have any more consents. They reached their limit. That's in the act.
Okay.
But
I
that's
think
where
I'm
go with
clear
the
on,
committee.
on both sides, guys. How about the rest of the team? Okay. Does anyone have anything else to add? Yes, please.
For any members of the public that are attending, can you please state your name for the record?
Yes,
Thank you.
My name is Lise Daniel. I own In the Village, which is just south of the property. This is my neighbor Bobby Lococo that owns Sweet Thoughts 2 doors down. I wanted to thank you for your comments with regards to the drainage. We can tell you exactly where the water drains, right into our basements. Our sump pumps run constantly. So I would be in support of doing this checklist to make sure that it's not going to cause a further issue for us. My sump pump was full this morning, and we haven't had rain in how many days, so that just indicates how things really do go south. For me, first and foremost is concern about parking. I know that it was mentioned that there won't be any impact with the parking. As you may be aware, our parking has finally been permitted. I think it's supposed to be done next week at the water station. In my opinion, that won't solve our issue because people park there already, but that will help. But as a question, if this home is built on the property and it's Saturday, 11 o'clock, and this homeowner has a party, where are they going to park? That would, it would probably fall back on the street. So that is one of my concerns. We already don't have parking. My customers come in all the time and say they wanted to shop but couldn't because there was no parking. And I think you would say the same thing. So that the parking is critical for us. And I'm speaking on behalf of Hamiltons of Pelham as well. What happens is the 4 people go to the coffee shop, sit there for 2 hours, and take up 4 parking spots. And now if there's an impact where this homeowner has guests or anything like that, that could be very bad for us. So that would be my major concern, would be the parking on that. Stan's been a wonderful neighbor, and we really want to support him. Thank you.
Just a quick question for you before you sit down. Have either of you had damages to your homes in the basement?
I can't say, my building's 150 years old. I can't say it's damages. I can say it's wet a lot.
Okay,
And
no,
I've
but
had
what
to
I'm
get
saying-
some pumps repaired and that type
Okay,
of thing.
okay, but,
How about you?
We have 2 running constantly, every day.
right, but what I'm saying is that you haven't come home from a long weekend and the basement's got 2 feet of water in it.
If the pump kicks
If the-
out.
yes,
yeah.
Came home from Puerto Vallarta with this much water in the
I
basement.
have the same problem and I live at the other end of town, so I hear you. Okay, so,
But yeah, it just drains down right through.
I hear you. Okay,
And even to the backyards even. I know Hamilton's of Pelham have had a lot of wetland in the back of their yard as well,
okay.
so.
Yeah, that's been a theme in our work, right? The drainage, because of our area being the way it is. I think you have a comment over here?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. We are carrying out a design now for the section of Effingham to urbanize it. So we'll be getting curb, gutter, catch basins, and a storm sewer running down there. So the significant runoff that comes from Highway 20 down there to the Ridgeville area should be eliminated. So that will all disappear, which means that the runoff from the road section of it should be taken out of the equation altogether.
That's wonderful, thank you.
I think the biggest question is we're not opposing it. We're just, like you said, in the future, 5-10 years from now, somebody wants to come in and they want to put a plaza in there or a bigger home. As long as there's ample parking in that design, I think that's our major concern. As long as there's proper parking to assist it, whatever ends up going in there down the road, or whether it stays agriculture or changes.
Yeah, I think the parking, and we probably would all agree, it's part of it, but it's a separate issue completely, right? Because so many people are affected in our town with the whole parking thing. And I think what we're doing here today is to really look at, does this part 1 make sense as a residential property, and have they met all the requirements, right? And I think the town has come up with a couple of requirements that they've asked for as part of approving it. And obviously, I believe his name is Stan. Is it Stan?
Stan.
Yeah, Sam. He has done a good job of kind of explaining why He wants to, get some relief on some of these conditions. Does anyone else have any comments or questions on this? Please, yes.
I am Stan Rutina. I don't live on a corner, but I own a corner property. The property there is been rented. I had good tenants and I had bad tenants. Right now, I'm trying to get rid of all the tenants due to the fact there's problems with some of them. I live behind, and I also have a driveway behind the Bell Telephone where the flower shop or the flower greenhouse they have used to be. Can't remember the old person that had it ages ago, that had the campground. Anyway, so they use my driveway. Further down, I have another driveway. Past my house, I have another driveway. So that way, if I'm renting the land to somebody, they can use either driveway. And the only thing that puzzles me, when we bought the property ages ago, when my dad and mother were still alive, it was Central Motors across the street. GM dealership, a very big they had Cadillacs and Buicks and everything else. And at that time, I went to the town and talked to one of the counselors, and I says, oh, they're rural commercial. So can I make mine rural commercial? And the lady says, well, we will go through it. And sure enough, it was made rural commercial. And now it's beyond me why it's being taken away. The barn that I have there is old. It's got 7 levels, and nobody knows that. 7 levels in that barn. And I know my past lawyer, he's retired now. His wife is into antiques and all that. She says, oh my gosh, you know what you can do with that barn? I said, no. With 7 levels, like they do in Niagara and the Lake, different boutiques. I says, yeah, but you got to have an elevator, you got to have steps. I'm not prepared to do that. Right now, the barn is filled with all kinds of antiques, and I'm debating what to do with it. I've been told down by Mennonite country, I saw an article in the Farmers Magazine, they're collecting things for a school. So I said, well, you know what? I would love to give them that barn for free because they would take it apart and rebuild it over there. And whatever they get, that would be for their schooling for the kids. I'm willing to do that. But then I'm 81 years old. I had a knee replacement. Now my hip is starting to go. And I can't do that. So it's beyond me why that commercial designation was there, and all of a sudden it's slowly taken away in one way or another. And I agree with these ladies 100%. We don't have any water in our basement at the corner. No water at my place because water goes straight down. Since it goes past Canberra Road, sure, it goes around to the side, and I can see their problem. But they don't have to worry about parties because I'm not going to have any parties on that corner at all. I'm just trying to be helpful and help everybody. So that's my situation. If there's any questions you want to ask me, by all means.
Yeah. No, I think, thank you for the added comments. Gave us a little bit more perspective on the whole property. I guess what I want to make sure for our group is that we kind of stay focused on kind of what we're here for today, which is talking about part 1 and allowing that let's say severance to happen, right? And what are the conditions to that? So if I hear you guys correctly, the town is on board if we meet those conditions, but you're opposing 2 of the conditions.
We want to debate them. We're looking for some relief from them if all possible. I think there's better solutions to it, but if that's what the outcome is, that we have to abide by it, unfortunately, that will make further contributions and further delays that we'll never be able to meet the year in order to accomplish some of that. Because like you say, you can surveying equipment out there and going and doing that. And whereas it appears that plans are available from the region, I understand the engineer. However, that site, if it doesn't get built in 10 years, the lands can change during that 10 years without no one doing anything. Just being from the climate changes that are taking place. And that will require further study, further engineering to be done, and geographic information provided. So it's almost like a waste of money now. It has to be done closer when in fact something is being proposed for that corner. And on the
Yes,
back
but-
of the agricultural site,
But sorry, but the engineer made it very clear that this is required based on understanding what's going to happen with the existing property and what could possibly impact future development, right? So I understand the town's kind of precautionary approach, right? Because we've had these situations before where we didn't do this and there was really bad situations that ended up happening. So I think that's where we're clear. So I'm a little confused, because if they knew the conditions were what they were today, and they were here for us to grant them their application, how do we move forward if they're not willing to meet the conditions? Is that fair?
Through Mr. Chair, I would just advise the applicants that that 1 year period has now been extended to 2 years in the Planning Act. So you would have 2 years to fulfill conditions just because of all the delays this came about after COVID. But you are correct, Mr. Chair, that some agreement would have to come to either strike conditions or pass with conditions.
Yeah, so should we vote on whether we should strike the conditions first?
So essentially, you would pass the motions with or without the conditions. So you don't need to vote to remove them. You would just put a motion
Yes.
forward either
Okay.
with or without.
Okay, I think I understand. Brenda, please?
So can we close the public portion of the meeting?
Yes,
Yes, let me just confirm with the email. Just one moment.
make sure there's nobody else.
Yes, it's 4:44 p.m. We've received no emails. Is there anyone else from the gallery that would like to come up to make a public submission?
Sure, okay.
Is there no?
No, I think we're good.
Okay, through you, Mr. Chair, it is 4:44 p.m. and we can now close the public portion of the meeting. I'd be looking for a mover and a seconder, please.
I move to close the public portion of the meeting.
Can I second it?
And I can do the motion for approval?
Yes, please. Thanks, Brenda.
Okay, so file B12, 2023, 305 Canberra Road in the town of Pelham. Applications for consent to convey Part 1 is hereby granted. The above decision is subject to the following conditions: to the satisfaction of Public Works, submit a comprehensive overall lot grading and drainage plan for all parts, confirm that no existing utilities cross the proposed lot line. To the satisfaction of planning, rezone Part 2 to an agricultural purposes only zone. To the satisfaction of the Secretary-Treasurer, provide the Secretary-Treasurer with a registerable legal description, a copy of the deposited reference plan, and the final certification fee of $423 be provided. This decision is based on the following reasons. The application conforms to and complies with the town's official plan, the regional policy plan, and the provincial policy statement and the town zoning bylaw. This decision is rendered having regard to sections 5124, 5125 of the Planning Act. The committee considered all written and oral submissions and finds that, subject to the conditions, this application meets Planning Act criteria, is consistent, and complies with provincial, regional, and town planning policy.
Okay, so I'll second you.
Thank you. That motion has been moved and seconded.
I'll second it.
Thank you. And for the vote, Mr. Chair,
Yes.
if we could just take a vote for approval.
Okay.
Yes.
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 Thank you. So to conclude, file B12/2023P has been approved, and we will now move on to B13 and B14, 1053 Pelham Street. Seeing as the two are related in development, and we will proceed with hearing these files concurrently, and I will now share my presentation.
Okay. You want to read it?
Just a moment.
Read it down?
Sure. This one?
Yep.
Oh, just a moment. I'm going to do my
Okay. Oh, you're okay. Get everyone in.
Applications for consent file B13 and B14, 2023P, 1053 Pelham Street. The subject parcels are parts 4, 5, and 6 on the sketch on the south side of Homestead, lying east of Pelham Street in the town of Pelham. The applications are made for consent to partial discharge of mortgage, consent to convey 280.9 square meters of land, Part 4, for future construction of a single detached dwelling, and consent to convey 168.3 square meters of land, Parts 5 and 6, to be added to the abutting property to the north, Part 4, for future detached dwelling. The following comments have been received. From the Building Division, no comment. Public Works Department, per Public Works comments on consent files B11 and B12 2022 and minor variance file A15 and A16 2022, the applicant has satisfied all the requirements to clear the conditions with regard to the lot grading and drainage. However, the proposed application resurfaced the issues with the creation of a future Part 2 and 3. Future Part 2 is to be individually serviced with its own sanitary and water connections. This work is to be done by the owner at the owner's expense and will require a temporary works permit. Should there be an intention to sever the lot in the future, the sanitary and water services for each unit will need to be contained in their respective lots. Should these services cross property lines, Public Works will not support the consent to sever. A tree preservation zone west of the driveway would require protection and preservation. See conditions. No public comments were received at the time of writing the report. Planning staff are of the opinion that the proposed consents are consistent with the PPS and conform to provincial, regional, and local plans. The resulting parcel will comply with applicable zoning bylaw regulations upon the granting of concurrent minor variance applications, A19, and are not anticipated to negatively impact the surrounding neighborhood with respect to traffic, servicing, privacy, and stormwater management. Planning staff recommend that application number B13 and B14 2023 be approved, subject to the following conditions. Undertake to merge Part 4 on title with Parts 5 and 6. Submit an overall lot grading and drainage plan to demonstrate that drainage does not negatively impact nor rely on neighboring properties to the satisfaction of the Director of Public Works for Part 1 through 6. Such grading plans shall include the requirement of a new catch basin in Part 3 to the benefit of Part 2. Prepare the easement documents and register the proposed drainage easement, Parts 3, 6, and 7, on title to the satisfaction of the Director of Public Works. That the applicant confirm that no existing utilities currently cross the proposed property line to the satisfaction of the Director of Public Works. Should any cross this new property line, the applicant will be responsible for costs associated with relocation and/or removal. That the applicant obtain a driveway entrance and culvert permit for Part 1 and Part 4 from the Public Works Department for the construction of all new or modification to existing driveways or entrances. The installation and/or modification of all entrances shall be completed in accordance with town standards and shall be to the satisfaction of the Director of Public Works. That all necessary zoning approvals, minor variance be obtained for Part 4 to the satisfaction of the Director of Community Planning and Development. That a demolition permit be obtained prior to the demolition of the existing garage on Part 4, and the garage be demolished to the satisfaction of the chief building official. That the Secretary Treasurer be provided with a registrable legal description of the subject parcel, together with a copy of the deposited reference plan for use in the issuance of the certificate of consent, and that the final certification fee for each file of $423 payable to the Treasurer be submitted to the Secretary Treasurer. To you, Mr. Chair, we do have the agents for these files with us today, and I do believe they have a presentation for you.
Thanks, Sarah. I am going to bring that presentation up right now. Bear with me for a moment. Good evening. Thank you for having me today. My name is William Heikup. I'm the planning manager with Upper Canada Consultants, and I'm representing the owner and applicant for the subject lands known as 1053 Pelham Street. We're in front of you this evening for applications consisting of consent and minor variance. Here you can see the subject lands are located at the corner of Pelham Street and Homestead Boulevard in South Fawn Hill. Here you can see an outline of the subject lands pertaining to the application. We have the existing single detached dwelling centering the existing property and the existing detached garage along the homestead frontage. This is to be demolished. The property is within the urban living area built boundary designation within the town's official plan and is currently zoned as residential 1. Just to provide some background before getting into the proposal before you today, I did want to advise the committee the subject lands were previously subject to 2 severance applications, which created 2 lots on the south side of the existing dwelling, parts 2 and 3, and parts 4 and 5. The parts 3 and 4, as identified on this reference plan, show the required easement for drainage purposes. And so that background provides some clarity and information about the technical nature of the application in front of you today. I've tried to colorize it to explain the different components of the plan, but overall the application is really seeking to create one new lot fronting on Homestead Boulevard, and that's shown in yellow and green with the dash blue line around it. So the consent application seeks to sever part 1 from part 4, and then the boundary adjustment will add part 5 and 6 to part 4, coming from part 2 and 3. Overall, as I indicated, the intent of the application is to create one new single detached dwelling fronting Homestead Boulevard and to update the drainage easement. And you can see that now illustrated as parts 3, 6, and 7. The purple area, parts 7 and 8, is not subject to the application, but I know when you drove past it, you probably didn't see those lots there as they were more recently created. Now for the minor variances. In order to facilitate the lot creation, a minor variance is required on the newly created lot. We're seeking a reduction of the required lot frontage of 15 meters. We're seeking to reduce that down to 12.28 meters, or just over 40 feet. The proposed lot will otherwise meet the lot area requirements and has a sufficient depth of 36.59 meters and is sizable enough to accommodate a single detached dwelling. There's quite a few examples within the Lot 177 area along Tanner and some of the other streets in behind there that have example lots at a similar size. The other 2 minor variances are required for the existing dwelling and the remnant parcel for that. So we're looking at a minor variance for a rear yard setback and a minor variance for a deck encroachment. So the existing dwelling is not perfectly located on the remnant lot, and in order to accommodate the proposed lot line, the existing dwelling is proposed to have a rear yard setback of 4.78 meters. The existing dwelling has an existing rear yard deck as an amenity area off of the rear wall of the building. A minor variance is required to allow that deck to be maintained in its existing format without a roof. Even though it has a roof now, we will be taking that off. So the encroachment is measured at 6.42 meters from the original 7.5 meter requirement. So while there was a rear yard of 4.78 meters, the encroachments needed from the original yard setback. Overall, the remnant parcel and existing dwelling are both 2 fairly large-sized lots from a modern perspective. The existing dwelling will remain on a lot that is 728 meters squared with over 22 meters in frontage at 22.88 and has a lot depth of 31.78 meters. So the lot will continue to function appropriately, providing enough space for driveway and associated parking. The front wall of the building of the existing dwelling is over 13 meters from the front property line. The exterior side yard wall is approximately 10 meters from the exterior side lot line. So this space will continue to add for a traditional kind of yard amenity area, leaving ample space for that traditional green space grass yard So there's a number of existing trees along the Homestead Boulevard frontage, and that will help protect and maintain a viable yard space there. Overall, the proposed minor variances meet the 4 tests of the Planning Act, and in my opinion are considered minor in nature. In conclusion, the proposal satisfies and conforms with the applicable planning policies. The intended land use are a single detached dwelling, and the proposed and retained lots conform with the majority of the R1 provisions, aside from the variances that we're seeking here tonight. The variances are required to accommodate the existing dwelling and deck. As indicated, the deck roof and the garage will be removed to facilitate the severance. Overall, the proposed land uses are similar and compatible with the adjacent development. And we've reviewed the staff report and conditions imposed and have no concerns with those. So that concludes my presentation. I'm certainly here to answer any questions that you may have. I figured I'd just bring this back up. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate it, William.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, before we proceed, I just want to clarify that right now we are discussing the consent files only. I know that the presentation did cover all 4, and if the consents do pass, we'll move on to the minor variances, so you will have another opportunity to discuss that.
Okay. Okay. So we're just doing file the first 2.
Yeah. B13 and B14, so the 2 consent files. And then if those pass, then we would consider the associated variances.
Just the one you want me to read?
Yeah, go ahead.
Huh?
Oh, sorry, before we continue, do you want to move to the public input?
Sure. I think we're
Okay, is
ready.
there any members of the public that are present today that would like to speak to this file? We do not have anyone over Zoom. I'll just check the email. Okay, seeing none, it is 4:59 p.m. and you may move to close the public portion, Mr. Chair. So I'd be looking for a mover and a seconder.
Any questions at all from anyone? No? Okay.
I just have a quick question of, in terms of Part 2, which was part of the previous consent application, what minor variances were approved with that?
That's a good question off the
I
top of
thought
my
it
head.
might be in the next,
Yeah.
that one.
Yeah, so that's the minimum lot frontage was likewise reduced to the 13.71
And that was all.
approved, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
The committee is still welcome to debate, but if we could just close the public portion, just a mover and a seconder on that motion,
Sure.
please.
Let's close the public portion. Who would like to?
I move to close the public portion of the
Great.
meeting.
Second? Perfect.
Second?
Thank you. Through Mr. Chair, you may move to committee input or to the making of a motion.
Well, I think the town has pretty much provided all the information we needed. Everything seems like it's a go. So do we move to approve?
If you wish.
Let's do that. Who wants to read it out? You're good at this.
You want me to do the
Yeah,
motion?
you're really good at this, Brenda. She's really good at this.
Okay, file B13, 2023, and B14, 2023, for 1053 Pelham Street in the town of Pelham. Applications for consent, partial discharge of mortgage, convey Part 4, and convey Parts 5 and 6. The application is hereby granted, subject to the following conditions: to the satisfaction of Public Works, obtain a driveway entrance and culvert permit for Parts 1 and 4, confirm no utilities cross proposed lot lines, prepare and registered proposed drainage easement for Parts 3, 6, and 7 on title, submit overall lot grading and drainage plans. To the satisfaction of planning, all necessary zoning approvals be obtained for Part 4. A demolition permit be obtained for the existing garage on Part 4, B13, 2023 only. To the satisfaction of the Secretary Treasurer, undertake to merge Parts 4 with Parts 5 and 6 provide the Secretary Treasurer with a solicitor's undertaking, a registerable legal description, a copy of the deposited reference plan, and the final certification fee of $423 be provided. This decision is based on the following reasons. The application conforms to and complies with the town's official plan, the regional policy plan, the provincial policy statement, and the town's zoning bylaw. This decision is rendered having regard to sections 5124 and 5125 of the Planning Act. The committee considered all written and oral submissions and finds that, subject to the conditions, this application meets Planning Act criteria, is consistent, and complies with provincial, regional, and town planning policy. The applicant is aware that future Part 2 is to be individually serviced with its own sanitary and water connections. The applicant is aware that tree preservation zone west of the driveway would require protection and preservation.
So, who would like to move to approve?
I approve.
Thank you.
I second that motion.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, can we just get a vote in the affirmative from everyone?
Yes.
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 Okay, so since those passed, we will move on to the associated minor variances. And I will share my screen, just allow me one moment. Okay, so minor variances A18 and A19, 2023P. The applications seek relief from, so A18, again, we're going to hear these concurrently just because they are part of the same development. So A18, Section 3.7, encroachments, decks uncovered to permit an encroachment of 6.42 meters into the required rear yard, whereas 4 meters is permitted. Section 6.1.2, minimum rear yard to permit a minimum rear yard setback of 4.7 meters, whereas 7.5 is required. And A19, Section 6.1.2, minimum lot frontage to permit a minimum lot frontage of 12.25 meters, whereas 15 meters is required. To date, the following comments have been received. From the Building Division, no comment. Public Works, please be advised that no side yard walkways that impede side yard swales shall be permitted, and C conditions. We'll go through the minor variance tests. So test 1, the variance minor in nature. For section 3.7, yes, the variance is not anticipated to result in any negative impacts on the adjacent uses or substantially remove any of the rear yard amenity area of the lot. There will be no shadowing impact, and the presence would not encroach on neighbors' parcels' private amenity space. Section 6.1.2, minimum rear yard. Yes, the variance is not anticipated to have significant negative impacts on the streetscape or adjacent properties, as the existing dwelling will be maintained. Adequate area does exist on the property to provide for appropriate outdoor amenity area. Section 6.1.2, lot frontage. Yes, adverse impacts are not anticipated from the requested variance in terms of impact to the streetscape. The resulting built form is generally consistent with the existing neighborhood from a land use orientation and massing perspective and is considered an appropriately sensitive form of infill redevelopment. Similar lot frontages are also observed in the vicinity of the parcel. Is the variance desirable for the development or use of the land? Section 3.7, yes, the deck will enhance the outdoor amenity space. Section 6.1.2, yes, appropriate private amenity space will be maintained on the site in the interior side yard. Section 6.1.2 for minimum lot frontage, yes, the variance will allow for a single detached residential dwelling in the R1 zone. The requested zoning relief promotes appropriate development standards to help facilitate compact form and intensification, as is promoted in provincial and municipal legislation. Does the variance maintain the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw? Section 3.7, yes, the increased encroachment is not anticipated to have a significant visual impact and therefore remains adequate rear yard amenity space to service the dwelling. Section 6.1.2, minimum rear yard, yes, the parcel will maintain adequate amenity space. The reduced rear yard setback is not anticipated to have significant visual impact from homestead and as the structure is existing. Section 6.1.2, minimum lot frontage. Yes, the reduction in lot frontage is not anticipated to have a negative impact on the streetscape or the ability to site a dwelling. Dwellings along Homestead and Tanner Drive have similar lot frontages to what is proposed, the reduction in frontage will continue to allow for adequate setbacks for a future single detached dwelling. Does the variance maintain the general intent and purpose of the official plan? Section 3.7, yes, staff are of the opinion that the requested variance is not considered to have significant impact within the context of the official plan. Section 6.1.2, minimum rear yard, yes, the variance will have no impact on the streetscape as viewed from Homestead, as it is recognizing existing conditions. Section 6.1.2, minimum lot frontage, yes, the variance will maintain the policy intent of the OP because they will allow for intensification of an existing neighborhood, add to the housing supply, support existing infrastructure maintenance, and make more efficient use of the large existing residential lot. The reduction in lot frontage is not anticipated to negatively impact the character of the neighborhood. Staff are of the opinion that the proposals make efficient use of the land, will not result in the overbuilding of the property, will not alter the view, sightlines, or personal enjoyment of the subject property or any neighboring properties, should not negatively impact the surrounding neighborhood with regard to land use, traffic, privacy, and stormwater runoff. Planning staff have recommend that the application numbers A18/2023P and A19/2023P be approved subject to the following. That the approval of minor variance A18 and A19 are subject to the final certification of consent files B13 and B14. That the applicant submit a comprehensive lot grading and drainage plan to demonstrate that drainage neither relies on nor negatively impacts neighboring properties to the satisfaction of the Director of Public Works. That all necessary building permits be acquired prior to construction commencing. And that the applicant obtain approval for a driveway entrance and culvert permit as applicable issued through the Public Works Department to town standards. The applicant shall bear all costs associated with these works, and that condition is specific to A19. Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, it is the same applicant and agent. You may wish to see if they have any further comments.
Anything you want to add, William?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, basically, as indicated, the lot frontage that we're seeking, there's examples of it throughout the surrounding neighborhood. We feel that the single detached dwelling that would be able to be constructed on the property is very similar to any of the other single detached dwellings in the neighborhood. Regarding the rear yard setback and the deck encroachment, first off, the existing dwelling is kind of poorly located on the property, but it's there and it's existing. So when we reviewed the subject parcel and decided to make application for the second lot, we had some consideration that there was a very large front and exterior side yard area with an existing white fence and a number of large deciduous trees along the Homestead Boulevard. So that side yard area, in addition to the deck, is going to provide that full functional yard space that would be typical with a single detached dwelling. There was a number of people living in it, and they really only used the existing rear deck and didn't use the yard around it. I feel like some of those traditional requirements that you would see marketed with a single detached dwelling are changing over time. So we feel that given the context of its large size on the corner, that it's appropriate, considering the provincial and town policy framework, to approve these variances and allow for the severance to happen. I know that these are separate, but in a lot of ways they're tied together through the conditions. Typically, should the rear yard setback or the deck encroachment not be agreeable, we would just have to knock the existing dwelling down. But the way they've been done with these conditions, it really relies on that approval. And that's not the intent. We're seeking to keep the existing dwelling there. So that's my 2 cents in terms of the minor variances. We feel like they meet the 4 tests of the Planning Act. They do not create any impact and are desirable for the development of the land in addition to meeting the official plan and zoning bylaw intent. So if there's any questions, certainly here to answer them.
Do you have any questions? Maybe you can go first.
I just have one question about tree preservation. In terms of the trees along Pelham Street, are they being maintained?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes. So there's one existing tree inside the boundary that we're seeking to keep, and that's what the condition's for. But the shared trees that are in the public right-of-way or straddling the property line, we're not going to be removing those. We're intending to sneak a driveway in several meters from the north from the southerly property line, so that we can avoid that existing tree in the tree preservation area that that condition recognizes.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. Just again, this might be just me, but I'm really having a hard time understanding the deck thing. So when I look at the house, there is a covered deck at the back, right? You would like to keep that, and hence the variance for the property. Wouldn't it be just easier to, when you remodel this home, to, not have it or reduce it or keep it within the variance? What was the thought process there? I just want to.
The thought process, to you, Mr. Chair, was through that renovation process or through the sale process. We felt that is, a refresh by taking over the covered top off of it, and otherwise leaving it. Right now, it functions really well. It has some steps that come out to the driveway area, and we feel like it's a really valuable asset for the property.
And it's just got a basic foundation, right? It's not like there's any dwelling underneath or anything like that.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that was my only question. I just wasn't sure how that would play in, and if the roof being removed is part of it, that kind of helps from a site perspective. So, I think we're okay there. I think I'm good. Does anyone else have any questions or comments? Okay.
If you don't mind, I will just check the email and close the public portion. So it is, is there anyone in the public gallery that would like to make comment before we continue?
Go on. It's okay. Oh, okay. All right.
Okay,
Good.
perfect. So it is 5:15 p.m. and we've received no emails. Therefore, you can close the public portion of the meeting, and I'd require a mover and a seconder, please.
Motion to close the public portion of the meeting.
Thank you. And a seconder?
I'll be a seconder.
Excellent. Thank you. Through Mr. Chair, you may move on to committee input, debate, or a motion.
Any questions from anyone? Any concerns?
No, it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I think we're good to move ahead.
Yep.
So you're looking at me to do the motion
Oh, Brenda,
again?
you're just so good at this. Unless, Don, you want to do one, it's up to you.
Yeah, I move. What am I moving? Close the meeting?
No.
Move, close the meeting.
There you go.
Oh, am I going to read this? Okay.
Yep.
File A18-2023 and A19-2023, 1053 Pelham Street, Pelham. Applications are made for minor variance of A18-2023P, minimum rear yard of 4.7 meters, rear yard encroachment of 6.42 meters, and A19-2023P, minimum lot frontage of 12.25 meters. Application is granted, and the reasons the variances are minor in nature, as no significant negative impacts on the streetscape or adjacent properties are anticipated. There is no shadowing impacts. Built form is, on part 4, is consistent with neighborhood from a land use perspective. And reason 2, intent of the zoning bylaws maintained. Reason 3, intent of the official plan is maintained. Point 4, the proposals are desirable for the land as private amenity area will be maintained. The deck on part 1 will enhance the outdoor amenity space and will allow for a single detached residential dwelling on part 4. Item 5, the applications are granted without prejudice to any other application in the town of Pelham. 6, the Committee of Adjustment considered the written and oral comments and agrees with the minor variance report analysis and recommendation that this application meets the planning tests for minor variance. The applicant is aware that no side yard walkways that impede swales shall be permitted. Conditions, building permits, final approval of consent files B13 2023B and B14 2023B. Comprehensive lot grading and drainage plan be submitted. Driveway entrance and culvert permit, part 4. And is that it?
Yes.
That's it.
That's it.
And a seconder, please.
I second the motion.
Thank you. And for the vote?
Yes, for me.
Yes.
Oh, yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, that does carry, and that brings us to minutes for approval. We have one set of minutes for approval on this agenda, which is July 4th, and I'd be looking for a motion to approve.
Motion to approve the minutes of the July 4th meeting.
Second that motion.
Thank you. That does bring us to adjournment. Mr. Chair, it is 5:18 p.m., and I'd be looking for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn today's meeting?
I second the motion.
Thank you.